Everyone warned her to stay away from the dog labeled dangerous. But the moment she rolled up to his cage, he didn't growl. He remembered. Ronin wasn't just another shelter dog. He was once a decorated Belgian Malinois, a proud canine officer, known for his sharp instincts and unwavering loyalty. His name used to echo through training fields, followed by praise and the pat of a handler's hand on his back. But that was before the raid, the one that changed everything. His partner didn't come home. And neither did the Ronin everyone used to know. When animal control found him days later, he wasn't the same. He was wandering a vacant lot, muzzle bloodied, limping on his front leg, eyes dull and haunted. They said he didn't resist the leash, but he didn't respond to it either, as if he no longer understood the point. The shelter intake form didn't need many words. Aggressive. Do not approach. PTSD suspected. They marked his cage with a red tag, bold and final. Volunteers avoided him. New staff were warned not to get close. Some thought he was too far gone. Others said he was grieving in a way only war dogs could, a silence deeper than barks, a pain sharper than growls. His kennel was always the last on the row, half in shadow. He never barked when people passed. Instead, he stared straight ahead, still as stone, broken only by the occasional twitch in his scarred shoulder. And at night, when the lights dimmed and the voices faded, that's when the howling began. It wasn't loud, it wasn't wild. It was low, mournful, and terrifyingly human, like a ghost stuck in a loop, calling out to someone who would never answer. Other dogs stirred, some whimpered. Even the toughest volunteers admitted it gave them chills. No one visited Ronin. No one tried. Because how do you comfort something that no longer believes in comfort? How do you reach a heart that has buried itself so deep it's forgotten the sound of kindness? They called him dangerous, but the truth was harder to say out loud. He wasn't dangerous. He was mourning, and no one knew how to bring him back. The rain came down in a steady hush, soft and cold, as Ivy's wheelchair rolled across the cracked pavement outside the shelter. Her brother pushed quietly behind her, one hand gripping the chair, the other stuffed deep in his hoodie pocket. Neither of them spoke. They hadn't, really, since the funeral. Ivy was 10, but there was an oldness in her eyes that didn't belong to a child. She clutched a frayed scrap of cloth in her lap gray with age, edges curled and worn thin. It had once been part of her dad's firehouse jacket. He used to let her wrap it around her stuffed animals when he worked night shifts. Now, it was all she had left of him. He died 6 months ago, in a blaze that made the evening news and broke something inside her family. The accident that paralyzed Ivy happened just weeks later. And ever since, she hadn't laughed, hadn't really spoken, not like before. Grief sat heavy on her shoulders, as real and unmoving as the wheels beneath her. The shelter wasn't her idea, it was her brother's. A way to get out of the house, he said. Just to look. But Ivy had come with a quiet purpose. No one knew, not even him. She didn't look at the friendly dogs that jumped excitedly behind their gates. She didn't smile when one licked the glass or wagged until its body shook. Her gaze moved slowly, intently down the row of cages, like she was searching for someone she already knew. And then she stopped. Her hand gripped the cloth tighter. Her breath caught. It was Ronin. The warning signs were still taped to his gate. Do not approach. 9. PTSD. Her brother noticed, and immediately began to wheel her away. But Ivy pressed both palms against the tires, stopping the chair herself. No, she said softly, for the first time that day. I want to see him. The wheels of Ivy's chair creaked softly as she rolled to the final kennel, the one cloaked in shadow at the far end of the hallway. Staff exchanged nervous glances. One volunteer stepped forward, hand half raised as if to intervene, but her brother gave her a warning shake of the head. Ivy wasn't asking for permission. Inside the kennel, Ronin was still as stone. His back was to the door, but he knew she was there. Without turning, he let out a low, guttural growl. It wasn't loud, but it rumbled like distant thunder, quiet and full of warning. He stood slowly, stiffly, as if even that movement hurt him. The staff braced themselves. Ivy didn't flinch. Her eyes were locked on his, not with fear, but with something older recognition. Her hand slowly moved to her lap, fingers tightening around the torn piece of cloth. A patch of gray fabric, threadbare and stained with years of memory. And that's when Ronin noticed. His growl faltered. His ears twitched forward. The sharp edge in his gaze softened for a brief second as his eyes locked on the cloth. There was something in it, he remembered, something buried deep beneath months of trauma and silence. It was the same kind of fabric used to wipe down vests during canine training, to line crates, to wrap wounds in the field. Maybe it wasn't the exact one, but maybe it was close enough. He took a single step forward. Ivy noticed it too. She didn't move. She didn't speak. She just held the cloth a little higher, resting it across her knees, letting him see it clearly. "I know what it feels like," she finally whispered. Her voice was soft, barely audible over the hum of the overhead lights, but it stopped everything. Even the dogs nearby fell quiet, as if they too understood something sacred was unfolding. "You lost someone, didn't you?" Another pause. Her brother, standing just behind her, blinked hard and swallowed. "So did I." That's when Ronin stopped growling. He didn't lie down. He didn't approach. But something in him shifted. The tension that had gripped his shoulders for months loosened just enough for his chest to rise in a deeper breath. He tilted his head, just slightly, like he was listening. Not with his ears, with whatever was left of his heart. And in that moment, the air inside the shelter changed. No one spoke. No one moved. No one dared break whatever fragile connection had just formed between a girl in a wheelchair and a broken police dog no one thought could be saved. Ivy didn't speak again. She didn't move suddenly or make a sound. Instead, she slowly reached down, pulled the faded cloth from her lap, and gently laid it on the floor just inches from Ronin's kennel door. Then she backed away. Not out of fear, but out of respect. Ronin didn't charge. He didn't bark. He simply stood there, motionless, eyes locked on that small, crumpled piece of fabric. For a long, breathless moment, the room seemed to hold still with him. The staff stood frozen. Ivy's brother didn't dare exhale. It was as if the cloth had become something more than just a relic from Ivy's father. It was a key, unlocking something Ronin had buried deep. The rage in his body, the stiffness in his limbs, it began to shift. Just barely, but enough to be felt. A full minute passed. Then another. And then Ronin moved. One paw stepped forward, slow and deliberate. Then another. His head lowered as he approached the cloth, not with aggression, but with a kind of reverence. His scarred nose twitched, brushing against it, and his body gave a small, visible shiver. He didn't growl. He didn't retreat. Instead, he slowly folded himself down, right there at the gate, resting his chin softly on the cloth like it was something holy. His eyes stayed open, wide and glassy, but the tension that always wrapped around his shoulders was gone. He didn't look like a threat anymore. He looked like a dog who had been waiting for this, for her, for something to believe in again. He didn't sleep. He stood guard. Over a memory. Over a feeling. Over the first fragile spark of healing. The next morning, the shelter buzzed with quiet whispers. Staff who hadn't been there the day before replayed what they'd heard secondhand. Some didn't believe it. Others weren't sure. They wanted to hope. After all, was a fragile thing in a place like this. But those who had witnessed it couldn't stop thinking about the way Ronin had laid his head on that torn piece of cloth, the way his growl had faded into silence, the way Ivy hadn't flinched, hadn't spoken loudly, hadn't tried to fix him, just been there. Still, no one expected it to last. By noon, the shelter returned to its usual rhythm, feeding, cleaning, walking, updating charts. Ronin stayed in his kennel, quiet, alert, watching. He didn't snarl. He didn't pace. But he also didn't approach anyone who tried to make contact. Until she came back, Ivy rolled in, her brother beside her, and everything changed. Before anyone could speak, Ronin stood, not stiffly, not in alarm but with purpose. His ears perked, his eyes locked on her. And then, to the astonishment of everyone watching, his tail began to wag. Slow, careful, like a muscle, learning joy again. 8 months. 8 long months without a flicker of affection. Now, the dog they once labeled irreparably damaged was standing at the front of his cage, tail swaying gently, as if remembering what it felt like to be wanted. Ivy's face lit up, the first real smile anyone had seen on her since the accident. It wasn't wide, it wasn't dramatic, but it was real. And in a room full of eyes brimming with disbelief, it was the most beautiful thing anyone had seen. She reached toward the bars, and Ronin moved forward without hesitation. He pressed his forehead against her outstretched hand, eyes closing as he leaned into her palm, not just in recognition, but in trust. A silent vow. I see you. I remember. I choose you. There were no more tests, no behavioral assessments, no long discussions behind closed doors. The shelter staff, some of them with tears still drying on their cheeks, all came to the same quiet conclusion. Whatever had just happened between Ivy and Ronin wasn't a fluke. It was a bond, immediate, unexplainable, and entirely real. The adoption forms were filled out by the end of the week. Ivy's brother signed with a steady hand while Ivy sat beside him, one hand resting on Ronin's back through the kennel door. She didn't speak much, but she didn't need to. Her presence said everything. When the staff came to open the kennel, no one needed leashes or muzzles or calming voices. Ronin walked out on his own, head high but relaxed, staying close to Ivy's chair like he had always belonged there. For a dog that had once recoiled from human touch, he now leaned into her, as if gravity itself pulled him toward her. The drive home was silent, but not empty. Ivy kept the cloth in her lap, and Ronin kept his eyes on her, riding in the back seat with a calmness that stunned her brother. No whining, no pacing. Just peace. Over the next few days, neighbors noticed. They watched from porches and windows as Ivy rolled slowly down the sidewalk. Ronin walking beside her with perfect pace, never tugging, never straying. His bodyguard stance had softened, but the loyalty in his posture was unmistakable. Wherever she went, he went too. And Ivish was changing, too. The girl who once refused to leave her room now woke early just to take morning walks with Ronin. Her laugh, quiet at first, started to return. It came in bursts, in the rustle of leaves, the snort Ronin made when he sneezed, the way he tilted his head when she told him stories only they could understand. She stopped hiding the wheelchair. He stopped hiding his scars. Together, they moved through the world like two parts of a puzzle finally put in place. People waved. Some smiled. Some cried. They didn't always know the story, but they could feel it. A girl and a dog, both broken by loss, who somehow found healing in each other. Ronin slept beside her bed now. No more howling. No more nightmares. Just soft breaths and the occasional twitch of a paw chasing dreams that didn't hurt anymore. And Ivy? She kept the cloth in a glass box on her nightstand, not to forget, but to remember. Not all dangerous dogs are monsters. Some are just hearts too big for the world, waiting for someone brave enough to see them clearly. She saw him, and because of that, neither of them needed saving anymore.